Hey, folks, welcome to a very special episode of the Distortion Den. I'm Deke, and guess who's back? My good pal, Mr. Robert Lawson. Hey, Rob, how's it going?
It's good, Deke. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you bet. And now, before we get into our main topic, which is, of course, the Guess Who, I wanted to talk to Robert, and he can let everybody know where he can get, where you guys can all get his three fantastic books, and he can tell us currently what he's working on. Robert?
So the three books, the Nazareth book is now out of print.
Oh, okay.
So if anyone's interested in copies of that, I still have a few.
Okay.
I think I'm actually down to like my last dozen or maybe even less. So anyone can contact me directly for that. I can send out a hardcover Nazareth book.
Mhm.
The Cheap Trick and the Guess Who books are still available on Amazon, and Indigo Books can order it for you. I think they're a little pricier. Barnes and Nobles in the States, anywhere really. Those books are available everywhere, and I do have copies of those ones too, if people want signed copies.
Sure.
So all three books are still available. The Nazareth will run out at some point over the next few months, and then that'll be it for that one. I don't think I'm going to order anymore. And then my new book, which I've just finished, it's kind of going back and forth between a few different proofreaders, is about Little Steven Van Zandt
Nice.
and his musical career. So I've been working on that one for quite a while, and hope to have it done or all the proofreading done maybe, I don't know, end of January, or it depends how fast these guys are. It's like I have one guy who has gone through the whole book and found some issues, so we fix those. And then I have proofreader number 2, and he's about halfway through the book, and he finds tons of stuff that the first guy missed. And then
Wow.
I just signed up proofreader number 3, and he doesn't find too much, but he finds a couple things in every chapter, and sometimes it's just real dumb stuff, but it's stuff that I really want us to catch. So that'll be out at some point in 2024. I don't know if it'd be like midsummer, or it's kind of hard to say at this point, but it's humming along. I still have to talk to Steven. He has agreed to be interviewed for it. So once I do that, then we're completely done.
So it's basically a legit book. I mean, if you're talking to the man himself, Little Steven, he's obviously okay, and you're probably going to do now. You're probably doing this book the same way you've done your other ones, right? With the CDs, the reissues, the singles, the da-da-da. It's not like the Little Stevie Van Zandt biography that he put out a year or two ago. This is something totally different, which I think people should know.
Yeah, it's definitely not just his biography. Like, it's like a musical biography, really. So each chapter is a different album or a different kind of period of his musical life. And I do have a chapter about Sopranos. I don't know if you can see when you mentioned his autobiography at the top of that shelf right there.
Okay, there you go.
That's like 9 or 10 different copies of his autobiography that I have.
What? Man.
Like all different languages.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's got to be pretty exciting that you're going to be lining up to chat with him. I mean, that's a pretty huge score when he's basically endorsing what you're doing, which is nice.
Yeah, I pitched it to him in April.
Mm-hmm.
I was with him for a little bit, and he signed up immediately. He got involved right away. So we'll see. Hopefully it still happens. Hopefully he's still okay with it. His wife has participated a little bit, and I've interviewed, I think it's 29 or 30 either current or ex-band members, which is way more than I've ever talked to for any of my books. Like way more.
Yeah.
Usually it's like 4 or less. So I've got a lot of people on board with this project.
Well, that's awesome. Can I just throw out a name see if perhaps he was one of the 29? Would one of them be Michael Monroe?
No, he's not. And I thought about reaching out to him because I actually have a specific question for him that I had asked Steven on Twitter, and Steven didn't know the answer. So I might try that. Maybe he'll be number 31.
Oh, 31. There we go. Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey, everybody. So, and as the socials go, you can find Robert on Facebook and Instagram. Anywhere else?
I'm not that active on Twitter anymore, but I still kind of pop in once in a while and see what's going on. Steven himself is pretty active on Twitter, so I have to be on there just to see what he's tweeting.
Right.
But yeah, mostly Facebook and Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me.
For sure. And I'll leave it, folks, I'll leave it up a little right up in the bottom. And you know what? I always say when I get guys like Robert on, Sean Kelly, Brent Jensen, you know what? We got to support our local boys, our local Canadian boys, because these guys are independent. They're doing it basically on their dime. So let's all help them out, man, and support them and hit them up and get the books. I got so far all three of Rob's books, as you could tell. They're all fantastic reads. My personal favorite was the first one I ever got, Still Competition. And if you go back a few months ago, me and Rob did a deep dive into the Live at the Whiskey CD release, which did very well for us. And I think a lot of people dug it. So definitely check out Rob's books. So now, guess who? Now, Robert, you're the historian with the Guess Who. I mean, you wrote the book, Whitfield Empire. I guess the question is, I mean, I read the Rolling Stone article and a few other articles and whatnot. Why now?
For the lawsuit?
Yeah.
Well, it's, to be a little delicate, I feel like Burton Cummings didn't always have the team behind him who thought that this was a priority to address. And that's just, I can't go into too much more details about that. But now he does. So he finally has some people who are saying, look, this isn't right. It's been going on for too long. It's been allowed to continue for way too long. And we're finally going to get it sorted. Should it have happened 20 years ago or something? Absolutely. But again, people didn't want to look into it, or it wasn't a priority for people at that point. It is the priority for his people now.
So, yeah, and that's the thing, because there's all these other versions of the Guess Who floating around. I mean, once you kind of brought up the topic on Facebook, I started doing a bit of deep dive. And yeah, you're right. When they're advertising, there's another version of the Guess Who in the States. When they're advertising their pictures for their shows, it's not Bachman or Cummings. It's these other guys that are younger than them. And I guess it's Gary Peterson on the drums.
Yeah. So the Guess Who currently is a bunch of relatively young guys, except for Gary Peterson, who is the original drummer. And they tour as the Guess Who. And, none of them are on any of the classic albums except for Gary. And the real issue of the lawsuit, it's not so much that these guys own the name the Guess Who, because they do. So legally they have that on their side. So yeah, the issue is that they promote themselves as the original Guess Who. So I've seen tons of ads, and I've seen tons of even video commercials for this current version of the Guess Who, and they'll either use a classic Guess Who song with Burton singing and with the original band playing, or even a little clip of the original Guess Who, maybe from the reunion era in 2000, 2001, but it won't be those guys that you're going to see. If you go to see the Guess Who, Burton Cummings will not be there. Randy Bachman will not be there. Donnie McDougall, Bill Wallace, all these guys. And actually, there's a good chance that Gary Peterson won't be there. He missed a whole bunch of shows in 2022. I don't know exactly why. I've never looked into it, and I never asked Gary. I haven't talked to him in quite a bit. But he missed a whole bunch of shows. So that means if you went to see the Guess Who in 2022, chances were good that you would not see any original members. So if you hear a commercial on the radio or somewhere online and you hear Burton's voice and Randy's guitar and all that, tonight, the Guess Who, you'd be okay to assume that those guys are going to be there. So it's more the misrepresentation that the Guess Who management and the Guess Who band, I mean, they have to know this has been going on for years. And they started using it even more kind of during the pandemic, because once things started opening up again, they started doing some cruises, and they always played a lot of casinos and state fairs in the U.S. And they use the original Guess Who images and sounds to promote their shows. So that's the issue. It's this misrepresentation of who people are going to see. And I see it online all the time that people will post how excited they are that they're going to see the Guess Who tonight. Can't wait to see you, Bert.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's like, it's almost getting duped, so to speak. I mean, and shows aren't cheap now, especially after you said, like, with COVID shutting down, opening up, everything seems to have gone, price has gone up. And yeah, so if you're going to see Bachman play the solo in American Woman and Burton slam the cowbell in American Woman, you're not getting those two dudes there. So yeah, it's kind of sticky. And I get it. Everybody needs to make a living, but should be a little more honesty in play. But money talks.
Well, Bob says money doesn't talk; it swears. But the thing is, if they promoted themselves as some sort of a Guess Who tribute act, or the Guess Who show featuring Gary Peterson, that would be fine. But they're actually saying that they are the Guess Who did those classic albums, who recorded "Share the Land" and "So Long Bannatyne" and "Live at the Paramount" and all the albums that Guess Who fans know and have loved for years. They're saying that they're those guys. And that's the issue. It's not that they can't tour and play Guess Who songs. They can do whatever they want.
Right.
But you can't say that you're the Guess Who did all that work in the 60s and 70s. On social media lately, Burton's been really coming out swinging. There was a picture from a meet and greet that the Guess Who did. I don't know if it was a few months ago or something. Gary Peterson was not there. And there's a couple of women, probably in their 60s or so. I'm sure they're lovely, nice people. But one of them's holding the Road Food album.
Okay.
Which is, like one of my favorite Guess Who albums. None of the guys in that picture are on that album.
Wow.
So I don't know if she asked them to get it signed.
Shit.
Burton has seen, I know it's happened a couple of times where someone has given him a Guess Who album to sign, and some of these current guys have already signed the records.
Oof.
So that's really the issue. It's not just so much like, oh, why does he care if they're called the Guess Who? He's got a solo career and all that. It's not about that. It's more about the misrepresentation to the fans. And a lot of fans do not know when they go to a Guess Who show that they're not seeing actually anybody, or at best, it's just Gary, the drummer, who is on any of the classic Guess Who albums. That's the issue.
Right. And you know what? Case in point, I know early next year there's the Guess Who is coming to Thunder Bay, but they're calling themselves the Guess Who alumni, and it features good pal Carl from Coney Hatch. And
okay.
The ad specifically has Carl's picture and a picture of the guys that are in this band, the Guess Who alumni. Like, they already threw it out there. There's, you can read the ad and already know that there's no Bachman, there's no Cummings. So that to me is like way more legit. Like, you know what, if you're going to pay $60, you know what your $60 is going towards.
Well, absolutely. And I've seen Carl, I know Carl, and I've seen his show. So what Carl does, he usually calls it Carl Dixon Sings the Guess Who.
Right.
So he was in the Guess Who for a very short period of time. And so he has Bill Wallace, who is the band's second bassist, but he is from the original era. He's on a lot of the original classic albums after Bachman left. And then there's a guy named Laurie, who was also like in a later version of the Guess Who and stuff. But that's a fun show. I saw them like a year, maybe just before the pandemic. And it's an all Guess Who show. And Bill Wallace will tell some stories about recording different songs, and he even sings lead vocals. Bill's always had a great voice, and he used to sing lead vocals on a bunch of Guess Who albums.
Okay.
So he does a few songs, and it's completely legit. It's a lot of fun. It's great. I really hope that they come back around this area, so I can see them again, because I think I was still writing the book when I went to see the show, and actually that was the first time I met Bill in person, and now we've known each other for a few years. That's totally legit. That's why if the Guess Who, the guys who have the name, the Guess Who, if they did something like that, there'd be no issues whatsoever. If you
Right.
say, like I'm just riffing off the top of my head, but yeah, the Guess Who show or the Guess Who tribute featuring original drummer Gary Peterson, when Gary can make it, that would be no issue whatsoever. But you're not going to see the Carl Dixon show promoted with, the original song Share the Land or Rain Dance or any of those being sung by Burton. That's where the issue. So why is it that Carl can get it right, and that these guys in the so-called Guess Who consistently cannot get it right? If it only happened once or twice, you could say, well, the promoters, they were a little sketchy, or management dropped the ball. It's been going on for years, and in fact, during the pandemic, they even stepped it up. Because if you go to, I don't really use streaming services too much, as you can see from my background, but I know that if you go to at least Spotify and you type in the Guess Who, there you go. That's what I'm talking about. So you're seeing the relatively current group, and then underneath it's going to be the American Woman album and Share the Land and Artificial Flavors or Artificial Paradise, all the great Guess Who albums, and it makes it look like those are the guys who recorded those records. So that was something they started doing during the pandemic. They changed the image for a lot of the accounts, and I think Apple Music and some of the other streaming, I think they're all the same. I think they all have like that image or a current image, which makes it seem like those guys recorded those albums.
Yeah, that's a screenshot from my Apple Music. Yeah.
Okay, right, there you go. So I even checked it again yesterday, that Spotify still has that image, and there you go. Apple Music is using it too, which it's deceiving.
Yeah, totally. And like talking about the picture thing, going a little off topic here, the band Vandenberg with Adrian Vandenberg, same thing. You go to the Vandenberg page, because he has some albums out under his name. It's the picture of the band is when he was in Whitesnake. So, nothing to do with the thing. So I always wonder if, is this just an Apple guy at Apple not knowing anything about music and just throwing a picture down just because he Google searched the band or the guy's name and says, oh yeah, good enough, we'll just move it into here and da 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 da. But like you said, for a band on the Guess Who's level, it's a little more misleading when you see those guys. You think, wow, those guys wrote These Eyes,
right?
And Undone. No, they probably weren't even born, or if they were born, they're pretty damn young. So.
Yeah, and I've seen live clips too, where they'll say things, here's one from the American Woman album, or here's one from, and they're not coming out and saying that they wrote it or that but they are kind of implying it.
Yeah,
that it's their records, and they are not their records. Those albums are not the result of those guys.
No, and that's and that just kind of, but like you said, like you have other people, maybe they're paying the VIP packages, showing up with their records to get signed, and none of those guys are on that record.
I would love to hear from that woman who's holding the Road Food album, because she looks so happy and she's so excited to be meeting the Guess Who. And I would really, I'm real curious to ask, like, did you think that those are the guys on that album? Do you still think that those are the guys on the album? Because they will sign it, even though they're not on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a touchy thing. What do you think? I'm sure you've been following it quite a bit. How do you think the feedback's going? Like, do you think everybody's on board with Randy and Burton, or are there the other guys, the other side of it, saying like, who cares? They're doing what they're doing, yada yada, let it go, you guys. It's kind of old news. This could have been done about so many years ago. Like, where do you think, is there a divide, or is it, to you, seem one way or the other?
I see a lot of support from fans on social media. It seems like a lot of a lot of Guess Who and Burton Cummings, Randy Bachman fans, I don't think they were quite aware of this situation or how bad it was. So a lot of them seem to be really alarmed by it and really, shocked even that this is happening. So I don't follow every Guess Who or Winnipeg music group on Facebook, but of the ones that I'm in, I see a lot of support, and there's a little bit of pushback, which is natural. Yeah, why is it taking so long? Well, this is how long it took.
Yeah, and sorry, you talk about the pushback. I'm gonna pull up. On Twitter, do you know? You might not, probably don't know him personally, but Jeremy Taggart, he used to drum for Our Lady Peace.
No.
I follow him on Facebook on Twitter, and he commented about the Guess Who, and he said, quote, maybe you shouldn't have thought you didn't need the Guess Who when you signed yourself out of the company in the 70s. It was probably a good 20 years that you wanted nothing to do with the name. And that was his tweet. So there is the pushback. So yeah. Teach
I don't really know who that person is. That doesn't really mean anything because it leaves out the fact. Yeah, actually, that's nonsense. The Guess Who broke up in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 4 guys in the band at that point. They all went their separate ways. That's it. That's the end. Mm-hmm. And at that point, there wasn't a lot of value in like classic rock. We didn't kind of have that market yet. The idea that everyone will be listening to music from 25, 30, 40 years back, that didn't really happen in 1975.
That's right.
So in 1978, when Jim Cale asked Burton and Randy and whoever if it would be okay if he played some gigs as the Guess Who, yeah, they agreed to it. Why not? There was no foresight of what that could lead to. And Burton's solo career at the time was incredible. Mm-hmm. Randy had been out of the band for 5 years by 1975. So by 78, he's got Bachman Turner Overdrive going. He's got a lot of success as well. So them allowing or being cool with Jim Cale bringing the Guess Who back, I think that's natural, and it was more of a legit version of the Guess Who because he had Donnie McDougall, who was one of the last guitar players in the band, and he had Kurt Winter, who's a major force in the Guess Who. I would argue he's a more important figure, possibly even than Randy Bachman. Kurt Winter is like a huge legend in Guess Who history, and he's on the first kind of new Guess Who album that Jim Cale put out, an album called Guess Who's Back. So that's somewhat legit, and they would play shows and they would do new music that they had written on the album, and they would do older stuff, and Donnie could sing, and Donnie at the time he could sing and that even looked quite a bit like Burton. So that's kind of legit. And then by the next album, Kurt Winter's not there. And then and by the way, Gary Peterson is not on these records.
Sure.
So, sometimes the guys, when they talk about it now, like the current Guess Who guys, they say things that like Gary's always been, holding keeping the flame alive, and he's the only one who continued after Burton quit. But that's not true. Burton did not quit. The band broke up. When Cale's group got back together, even Peterson wasn't part of that. None of the guys in the 1975 lineup are in the 1978 lineup. So after that, guys just start dropping out until it's just Cale and a bunch of, kind of no-name guys from Winnipeg. And then that slowly leads into it being a retro act, being kind of a tribute act. And then, that led us to kind of where we are now, where this band's been playing live for decades on the name of the Guess Who. But to blame somehow Burton or Randy or anyone in 1978 for kind of being cool with Jim Cale going out on the road with a version of the Guess Who, that's just kind of like, that's false. I would say that's not the universal truth. There's only one universal truth. That's not the universal truth because, there's no way to know that there could be a hugely successful Guess Who reunion tour in 83, which they did, and then an even more successful reunion era from 2000 to 2003. You just didn't have that in 78. Everyone was moving forward. You didn't have, when bands toured, they would play new music. They weren't just doing greatest hits sets and stuff like that. So I don't. To me, you really can't blame anybody, and including Jim Cale. He didn't know that he'd be able to have a 30-year career of playing old Guess Who songs when he had the idea in '78 to maybe get back out on the road. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So to blame anybody for any of those decisions, including Jim Cale in 1978, I think is false. And that's why I don't think there's no issue in Jim Cale putting out Guess Who's Back in 1978. It's not a great record. It's not a great Guess Who record, but it's okay. And you got 3 Guess Who guys. And even the drummer that they got was kind of from a Guess Who adjacent band, and he was part of the Winnipeg scene and stuff like that. So it's still legit. It's not quite as good, but it's still legit. That's far different than what they're doing now, where they are only playing classic Guess Who songs. I don't know if they play 1 or 2 off their new album, but they also market themselves as being the classic Guess Who. That's very different.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and plus, back in the mid to late 70s, everybody was a lot younger than they are now. It's like we're going back 40 plus years, right? So, and it was a whole different time, because even now, April Wine's just touring with just Brian Greenway on guitar and Miles Goodwin, the audition, the guy to replace him.
Right.
So the voice. I mean, they keep going. Doesn't seem to be any issues there, but I don't even know if I'm sure they're still being advertised as April Wine. I mean, I guess you got the guy's endorsement. I guess that's how you roll differently. Now let's talk a little bit about another band that Bachman's in, that he brought back, which is Bachman Turner Overdrive. Now, to me, before I let you get going with this, to me, it should just be Bachman Overdrive, because from the ads I've seen, and I don't see any Fred Turner.
No.
So fill us in on that one.
Yeah, that is connected to this Guess Who thing, and it really makes you wonder kind of Randy's place in the Guess Who lawsuit. So in addition to not owning the rights of the name The Guess Who, Randy also for decades did not own the rights to the name Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Wow.
So how you're the founder of 2 of the biggest original Canadian bands and you don't know the name for either of them, I don't know. Randy needs better management and advisors. So for years he didn't own the name Bachman Turner Overdrive or B.T.O. His brother, the drummer Robbie Bachman, who I interviewed for my book a little bit, he owned the name. So for years he's been touring as B.T.O. So December, I think, of 2022, Robbie passed away suddenly, and when he did, the second thing I probably thought was, I wonder if Randy gets the name rights now. So sure enough, he did. He's the last surviving brother.
Right.
So he finally got the rights to the name B.T.O. So what does he do? Goes out on the road as Bachman Turner Overdrive. There's nobody on that stage except for him from Bachman Turner Overdrive. It's his son, who he's been playing with for years, and then just a bunch of other guys. I'm not sure if they're from Randy's solo band or where he gets these guys from, but there's Blair Thornton on guitar, and the big one, Fred Turner, not involved. So the real issue with this case for me is that Randy's telling fans at the shows that Fred couldn't be here because he's got some health issues, but he'll be joining us on tour as soon as he feels better. I know 2 different people in Winnipeg who know Fred and who have asked him to his face, "Are you going to be on this B.T.O. tour?" And Fred says, "Absolutely not." Fred's been retired from music for quite a while.
Right.
He's a bit of an older guy, and
sure.
he's enjoying just a mellow life in Winnipeg. Apparently, I think every Tuesday morning or something, you can find him at the same coffee shop with some of his buddies and stuff. He's this older retired guy, and he's enjoying that life. He doesn't need to get back on the road, and he hasn't done it in a long time. So, which is his right.
That's right.
But for Randy to tell the crowds, and also as soon as he announced that B.T.O was back, a lot of the images on the official B.T.O Facebook group were pictures of Randy and Fred, and even pictures of the original lineup saying, "Yes, we're back. Come and see us on tours. When we hit your town." And it's like, out of those 4 guys, Randy's the only guy. So he's actually the thing that he's involved in the lawsuit against Jim Cale and Gary Peterson's Guess Who. He's actually doing the same thing with Bachman Turner Overdrive. He's making it seem like it's the original group on stage. And then he's telling audiences, I have a buddy who went to one of the shows in the States. Okay. And he was like texting me from the show saying, Randy just said that Fred will be joining the tour, coming up. That's just a lie. I mean, maybe it's wishful thinking on Randy's part, but the word that I have is that Fred has been very clear. I think he might be getting a little bit of a royalty because his last name is being used, although maybe he's not. I don't know. I kind of don't think Randy pays well. But he's doing the same thing. So it's a really weird feeling about him. I don't think the biggest question should be, why is Burton pursuing this now after so many years? My bigger question would be like, does Randy really feel that strongly that Jim Cale and Gary Peterson are doing something wrong? Because he's doing the same thing with B.T.O.
Yeah, totally.
And in a similar fashion, the Guess Who rarely, if ever, play up here in Canada. Mm-hmm. Last year they did like one show somewhere in Quebec, but they rarely play, if ever. You're not going to see them anywhere around Manitoba or Ontario, and I don't think that's a coincidence. So in similar fashion, the B.T.O tour dates for 2023, they only did about maybe half a dozen shows or something. None of them were in Canada.
Right.
I think for the same reason that, you might be able to fool a lot of the people in the States because they don't have the face recognition of a lot of other groups. But a fake Guess Who or a fake B.T.O, it's not going to cut it up here. People immediately will be saying, if the fake Guess Who comes up here, immediately, where's Burton Cummings? And where's Fred Turner? When the fake, if the fake B.T.O had the balls to play up here.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, for me as a music fan, even just to call it Bachman Overdrive, I mean, Randy wrote the tunes, man, Taking Care of Business, Hey You and stuff. But, there's no denying Fred's contribution. I mean, listen to Let It Ride. I mean, you've got that gruff vocal that goes against Randy's, smooth vocal. And so it's almost like, well, you called it, man. I'm not even going to add to it. Can't do any better. But, I guess it all boils down to a lot of bands nowadays. It's about branding, like brand the name. So people, like you said, you throw it out as the Guess Who, you throw it out as Bachman Turner Overdrive, everybody's going to be like, and just the general fan who just listens to satellite radio and hears those tunes but doesn't do a deep dive, they're just going to want to hear, Let It Ride, American Woman, Stayed Awake All Night, Undone. Like, they're not invested as the true fans. So I guess maybe in a way that's where these acts are trying to target that audience as well. I don't know. I just.
Well, again, if Randy toured as, Randy Bachman's B.T.O show.
True.
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
But to use Fred's images. Now, here's the thing. Here's where the B.T.O thing is worse than the Guess Who.
Uh-oh.
Because if you think about it, so so they're both using the classic images to sell tickets.
Right.
So not cool. But where the B.T.O thing is worse is that Randy is specifically telling the audiences Fred will be on tour at some point.
Yeah.
The Guess Who guys don't say that. They never say, I don't think they bring up Burton or anybody's name during their shows. So actually, Randy's doing something worse because he's promising. He's lying to a huge crowd. I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 people, whatever.
Yeah.
Randy will be at future shows, and he also said there was a press release where he said that himself, Randy, and his son Tal and Fred were already writing and recording new music. Are they really though? Fred's in Winnipeg. Randy's on tour in the States. I don't think so. Maybe they made some, generic plans to like, yeah, maybe, maybe we can get together in the future and do a song. But by saying that they're already doing it, I've seen fans repeat that. Like, well, Randy said they're already in the studio. They're not. They're clearly not in the studio together. That might have just been like a very casual chat of like, yeah, maybe we'll do something in the future. But Randy's out there selling it to people.
Yeah. That almost falls under the not cool category. I mean,
it very much falls under that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think a lot of it probably maybe due to the fact that promoters and ticket sales. I mean, let's look at another band that we're both fans of, Kiss, right? They're coming to an end, or so they say. And, and I know that if Gene Simmons goes out as a solo band, he's not playing arenas because he's not going to be able to sell 15,000 tickets.
Right.
Like if he uses the name Kiss, right? It's like a whole different thing. I mean, they got the catalog and the public. Everybody in the public knows who Kiss is. So, but people aren't going to go in droves at an arena to see Gene Simmons play Kiss songs. They'll go see him as Kiss. Like that's the whole thing. I mean, even now we get into the whole issue with a band like Foreigner, cruising around everywhere saying Foreigner. And, they were down to just having Mick Jones. And now I don't even know if Mick Jones shows up to play anymore. I know Foreigner was here just after COVID stuff was lifted, and I didn't buy a ticket because I wasn't going to pay $150 for that show or whatever it was. It was well over $100. I just thought, well, if it's different, if it's Lou at the mic and Mick, because they came to Thunder Bay back in '83 and ironically did a co-headline show with April Wine. And it was a fantastic show, but they were Foreigner, but it was Mick and Lou. And to me, that's different than Foreigner with 5-6 guys and Mick, who might come off the bus to play a few songs with us, or chances are I don't even think he was in Thunder Bay for that show, but I could be wrong. But it's just the brand and just general people showing up going, yeah, I want to hear Hot Blooded and Cold as Ice and da da da. And, hey, that guy sounds good like the other guy. Okay, but to us diehards, we know the drill. But for a lot of people, I guess it's all about the brand now. It's bands or brands.
I guess at least with the Foreigner situation, Mick Jones, he's authorized this to happen. So it's not anyone doing it, without. And I don't know if he plays with them at all anymore. I know that a couple of years before the pandemic, he would only come out, I think, for 2 or 3 songs during a show. So when he's not on stage, 0 original members. My friend Mary is a huge Foreigner fan. She follows him around. She loves it. She has a lot of fun at the shows, but she also knows what she's getting.
Right.
Like she knows the guys who are in that band now. She's seen them enough times that there's no confusion there. So that's, again, the deception and the misrepresentation that's happening in the Guess Who and in the B.T.O case, where the Guess Who, at least through their ads, they're saying that Burton's going to be there.
Yeah, and
in B.T.O's case, Randy's actually coming right to the microphone and telling people straight out that Fred will be there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think with today's prices and all these different versions of bands floating around, people need to do their homework. I mean, if you drop, say, I don't know what the price is to go see the Guess Who in the States are, but if you're like, just to say $100, you're going $100 and you're wanting to hear Randy and you ain't getting Randy, you're gonna be pissed, and I'm sure that there's probably a little certain percentage that it has happened to.
Oh, sure. I've read tons of those stories of the Guess Who announcing that there's a show, and some of the fans who are a little more educated calling the venue and saying, I need you to confirm with me who's going to be there. Because even if Randy's not going to be there, there's still other guys. Like I said, Randy was fired from the Guess Who in 1970. So there are other lineups with other guys that are legit. Ever since this lawsuit was posted by Rolling Stone, I
Yeah.
see a lot. I see a lot of posts on social media of people going, if it's not Burton and it's not Randy, it's not the Guess Who. The Guess Who made great records without Randy. They made really, really good records without Randy. So, you know, it shows that Guess Who fans are not always super educated about who is in the band at different times. They seem to think that Randy's on the Share the Land album and that he played on, you know, Guns, Guns, Guns and Rain Dance and all these later great songs that they had. You know, Randy's not on Clap for the Wolfman. Okay. He's
What?
just not.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And see it me, and I'm not in depth knowledge with the Guess Who is nowhere even near you whatsoever. And until you just said that, I thought when I hear Clap for the Wolfman, I think Guess Who, I think Bachman on guitar.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. No, definitely not. There's like 10 or I don't know, 12 original Guess Who albums, and Randy's on like the first 4.
Wow.
You know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
records without Randy. So every time that I see a post like that saying, you know, if I see the Guess Who, it has to be with Burton and Randy. Right there, that's how the current Guess Who are getting away with this. That the fans are not super knowledgeable about who's on a lot of those records. You know, the song Star Baby and Dancing Fool and Sour Sweet and all these huge songs. Those are all after Randy's tenure in the band. Those are
Wow.
all non-Bachman songs. So they have a whole career after Bachman that's completely legit. A lot of big hits. Great stuff. So you can see how the current Guess Who can kind of get away with this, of people not really knowing
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how this $20 million lawsuit pays out in the next, plays out, and maybe pays out in the next little bit as far as the trademark, the name, and yada yada. So, Robert, if anybody hasn't and they need, and I think I need to read this book a little more hardcore and learn my stuff about Clap for the Wolfman, but folks, pick it up. And like I said, support local, support Robert and his 3 books. And Robert, as always, thanks for hopping on and talking music. And you're always welcome back to the Distortion Den.
Yeah, let's do it again soon.
You bet, bud. And thanks to everybody out there watching. We hope we schooled you in branding, trademarks, and suing. So later, folks, have a good day, and we'll talk to you all later.